China's very dangerous fiat currency and credit situation. With all the China news that has been coming out in the last 6 to 12 months, or early this morning, the Chinese government allowed the RMB to blow past the 7 exchange rate against the dollar. And also, hedge fund manager Kyle Bass said today on a Yahoo Finance interview that the Chinese financial system now has over $53 trillion worth of credit. I decided that I should do this update with charts and graphs to show to the China bulls who are adamant, who have closed minds, who do not have open minds. They believe that because China owns a lot of gold, that China does not have a debt problem or that it doesn't matter. So number one, the savings rate in China could be collapsing. And number two, there could be a lot of Chinese people who had money in the bank and are pulling it out. And this would make sense with what's going on now with the RMB against the dollar, the exchange rate doing what it is, and with the trade war escalating, how people who had money in Chinese checking accounts, savings accounts, etc. And M1 is mostly just cash and checking accounts. M2, I think, is a more broader money supply and includes more time deposits if you're not familiar with the M0, M1, M2. The fact that a lot of Chinese who had money in the bank have been pulling it out. They do not trust the RMB. They are pulling money out of their checking account, and they are using it to buy physical precious metals, probably gold and silver, and then also Bitcoin. There are a lot of corporate bond delinquencies rising in June and July, and it's probably going to keep getting worse, as we've seen with more of the current event stories from Baoshan Bank, Bank of Jinzhou, and some of these other Chinese management companies. There's a number of them that have been covered by the mainstream press that I also mentioned. A lot of these money management companies on previous live stream shows in my China coverage. This summarizes some of the main things going on in China's private sector, their corporate debt defaults. So there was record private sector corporate debt defaults in 2018. The 2019 pace is also very high, as even some Chinese billionaires are now defaulting on their debts. So there's a lot of research on this. There's over 50 million empty houses and still building in China. One of my sources in China says the building won't stop until basically the currency collapses, that it's part of policy. So basically it's make work jobs programs. As long as some credit's available, they're going to keep building. This is a chart that shows how much the corporate debt has exploded in China. So the corporate debt was near zero in 2005, 2006, 2007. And within about 10 to 12 years, it just went parabolic. It just went super high up. Now, it doesn't have 2019 on here, but this shows you the point that I'm making, that things have changed a lot in the last decade because China didn't have a debt problem really in 2008. Look at that chart. So China did not have any debt really, very, very little debt. They certainly didn't have a credit bubble. They certainly didn't have a real estate bubble prior to the last 10 years. I think this chart does a great job of illustrating it, even though it's not up to date at 2019. And we're seeing evidence that a lot of people inside mainland China do not want to hold the RMB. They want to hold gold. They're even willing to use Bitcoin as an intermediary to get around those capital controls, those $50,000 per year capital controls, and get their money out of the country into either other currencies or real estate or gold.
The economic burden of these tariffs is falling almost 100% on China. So their economy, which has been deteriorating, you can look at any long chart of Chinese investment, retail sales, and so forth, and you see a steady downdraft. Their GDP, which is probably inflated by several points, is coming in lower and lower. In other words, my point is, with respect to our disagreements and with respect to the president's tough negotiating with tariffs, I think China's getting hurt significantly, much more than we are, as I said before. So, okay, if they want to wait, maybe so, but the Chinese economy is crumbling. It's just not the powerhouse it was 20 years ago. Everybody knows that. And as I said before, supply chains are moving out. The demand for their goods is moving to other places. A lot of people are coming back home. It's very important. Lost in the tax reform debate, we're seeing now, because of our new tax laws, companies are repatriating their revenues and their profits and their whole factories and their productions to the United States. Some of that is coming from China.
The Chinese have been very, very specific that what they hate the most about the draft deal that they sort of reneged back in early May, they hate the part where it's legally binding. And there'll be a system that they more or less agreed to, and now they've backed out of, perhaps out of fear. There'll be a system to punish them if they're caught in violations. For example, if a company, American company, suffers theft of intellectual property or is forced to transfer technology, they can report that now through a system the Chinese agreed to with an appellate body and then a final decision to put tariffs or other kinds of punishment on the Chinese who did that. This has never been done before by any country in the world.
But if they hate that draft, why would they agree to it?
I think you know very well. In bargaining, sometimes the two sides can put pressure on each other, and finally the pain becomes unbearable. Two things have to stop. One is the cheating. I think he has a sense, it's in one of his books, he has a sense that China has cheated its way to the top.
Okay.
They have more billionaires than we have now. So we got to end the cheating. It may not be President Xi who's behind it.
I think the problem in the last week or so, Liz, has been the hardliners have taken charge in Beijing, and they're taking a very hard line, and they're actually retracting some of the deal that was put on the table from a month or two ago, and that has extremely frustrated this president, as it has our trade negotiators. It's hard to deal with a country that one day says they'll do one thing and the next day they do just the opposite. It's a depressing situation because, you know, the trade war is hurting us, but it's hurting China even more. I mean, China's getting really crushed by this trade war, but, you know, the Beijing politicians don't always have to do what's best for their own people.
You know, no reasonable person anywhere on any planet in this galaxy would think it's okay that any company would have to show its goods to a government in order to operate there. It's wrong. I mean, but the thing is, Steve, as you point out, consumers and businesses and farmers are saying no mas. End this now. I mean, U.S. GDP growth has gone now down to 2%.